Hello, hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Show. It's episode number 31, I think. Always happy to be here. Always a good time in my week to, do that live stream, having amazing guests with me, talking about DevRel, having a great technical demos. It's a little bit selfish because I learn from all those demos and I get to know new people. Like there are guests that I already know in person or from the internet, but there's also people like Chris. I don't think Chris, we've known each other before. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's get started, Chris.
Sure.
That's going to be a good question for me too, because I don't really know you. So who are you, Chris?
Well, my name is Chris Reynolds. I've been in the WordPress community for a really, really long time. I guess that's a good place to start. I've been using WordPress for probably close to 20 years. And in that time, I've done all sorts of stuff with WordPress. I started out like my first WordPress site was the reason why I came to WordPress in the first place was I had a kid. And when you have a kid, you take pictures of the kid, and then when you take the pictures of the kid, you want people to see those pictures. So I built a site that was for pictures, and I didn't really like it very much. It was just like some free script that I found, some PHP like blog thing, but it was not really getting updated. I heard about this WordPress thing. I thought, well, maybe that's a thing to check out, and I started using it for that. I started using it for myself. I had a site that, like back in the days when they were called weblogs, was when I had a weblog, and then eventually I turned that into a WordPress site, and then at some point I quit the job that I was doing at the time, which was like tech support, and went into freelancing, where I started specializing in WordPress stuff, and then freelancing. If anybody's freelanced before, they know that freelancing is hard, and sometimes you want to have food on the table. So I wanted to get a regular job, and that regular job ended up being I worked for a WordPress plugin development company called Event Espresso, which is an event management plugin. And at some point, I was asked to present at a WordCamp, which I had just recently started getting into. Or I presented at a WordCamp, and at that WordCamp, I was asked if I wanted to give these sort of presentations as educational courses, online development training for a company called Pluralsight that's also based around me. I'm in Utah. And so I did that for a couple years. And then also, like, royalties and getting paid for finishing my courses was very spotty. So again, I wanted a regular paycheck. So then I got into agency world and I worked for a couple different WordPress agencies. And then I decided I really liked working on product stuff. But also, and so I was interested in Pantheon, which is where I currently am, which we are a web ops platform, hosting and developer tooling and that sort of stuff. But what I really like I had known who Pantheon was before I joined, and I had known them because they had a really good DevRel team, and that was where I learned that DevRel was a thing that existed in the world. And like, I like to say that I've been doing DevRel for long before I was a developer advocate. Like I was speaking at conferences, I was doing documentation and stuff. And so when I learned that DevRel was a thing, I was like, well, I kind of want to do that thing. So I came in as an engineer, working on the platform and sort of the layer of Pantheon that touches most closely to the layer that our users or developers interact with it on. But I had always sort of in the back of my mind said, well, if an opportunity arises to move into DevRel, then that's what I want to do. And an opportunity showed up over the summer last year, and here I am. I'm a developer advocate.
That's a great introduction. I mean, yeah, and you basically answered my second question, which was basically the question that I like to ask everybody who didn't start as a developer advocate, which is like most people, like everybody had like a previous role in tech before. I don't know a lot of people who had like their first job as a developer advocate, but yeah, I like to ask like, how did you move from whatever you were doing before to developer relations? So you already answered that. I love it. And I would say most developer advocates I know, we were all doing the jobs before. The difference is that we're not being paid for. We
Right,
were probably
exactly.
doing it like on their free time for the pleasure of like sharing our knowledge or being on a stage or doing videos or stuff. Or if we were paid, there was like a really small subset of like, oh, you're social engineers. Like maybe you can talk at that conference for us, but your main role was like coding.
Right.
So yeah, you basically took the pattern that like most of us did before doing developer advocate. So that's great. Question about that though. So it's kind of like new-ish. It's been a couple of months from my understanding. How's
Yeah.
it going? Is it as good or as bad as you thought?
Oh no, it's everything that I expected it to be, and I like I said, I feel like I've been doing it for since before I was doing it officially, and like I feel like it's a natural progression of like where my skill set lies. I feel like especially you get into a certain level of engineering. I mean, for me, like I was always interested in creative writing, and I was involved in theater and like doing like I'm kind of an
Oh,
extrovert, and so that's not a typical pattern amongst developers. A lot of developers are kind of like very quiet or introspective. They maybe don't have the best bedside manner at all times, um, and they're not super great or not super enthusiastic about writing documentation. But those are all things that I really like doing. I like giving presentations. I like writing documentation. I like talking to people and like showing off demos and whatever. So those are all things that like I know that I have a unique sort of like skill set in that area. So like this is just like it always felt like I was just this is playing into my strengths more than just being in engineering where um, yeah, I mean, I can be an engineer and I can do that, but like I have all these other skills over here, like all these muscles that I'm just not using when all I'm doing is development.
yeah, no, I heard you. And when you were talking about like the fact that you have some skills that like any like not all developers has, and that's a true thing. On my free time, I give meditation and Buddhist philosophy courses. So I'm with a lot of people that are not in tech, and often when I tell them what I do, and they're like, "Oh, we thought that developer was a little more shy and a little more introvert." And I was like, no, that's true. And it's not negative. It's not a bad thing. It's just
Right.
like another way of being a human. But I'm also like you, like I'm really an extrovert social person. I love to talk to people. I love to meet new people. I love to, share my knowledge. I love to help other people being successful. And right now, unfortunately, I lost.
Uh-oh, lost your internet too. Do 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 frozen. Do 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 filler. Do 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 do. I hope Fred comes back. Ask me questions about DevRel, I guess, or WordPress if you're watching live. I'm in the chat. Or I can start presenting a demo. Oh, now I'm the host. That's a scary thing. Well, I guess I will just jump in while we're waiting for Fred to come back to his own podcast. Uh, and I can talk a little bit about the thing that I came on here to talk about, which is a thing that I've been playing with over the last, well, I guess a couple years really, which is using AI or ChatGPT or large language models for AI assisted development. I've used AI for a bunch of other things too, but using it in a development perspective is a thing that I've been doing more and more of. And I recently learned that it's called vibe coding. There's a phrase that came out that somebody, I guess the guy from one of the engineers from ChatGPT from OpenAI invented the term a month ago or sometime last month, and now everybody's talking about vibe coding. And I realized just really in the last couple of days that I've been doing this myself for a while. And I guess I can't actually bring the screen on board, but here's Fred, and he's back, and I can stop vamping.
Yeah, sorry, I had like a really short power outage, and that's the first time it's a new house. I joined here. I bought the house like a couple of months ago, and I have like a battery. Everything is connected on it, like my Wi-Fi, my router, my Wi-Fi, my internet device, like from the internet provider is connected on it. And now I just learned that the internet provider batteries for whatever is like giving me the internet does not work. Meaning that yeah, it
Cool,
took
cool.
forever to come back. Like I had my computer, my mic, everything else was working because it wasn't battery, it was on a UPC, except the internet that was on a UPC, but like from like there's no internet that was coming at my house. So thanks for keeping the show time. Hopefully that won't happen again, but it was so short that I'm a little bit afraid. So if that happened, sorry, folks. But yeah. So I don't know where you were, but like in when I got cut out, I was talking about the fact that unfortunately I lost my job about 3-4 weeks ago. So now I'm doing interviews, and when people like tell me like, hey, what's your experience, who are you, I'll always say like, I started as a software developer. I've done that for, I don't know, about 10 years, but now I decided, because I'm an extrovert social person and I love to help and I love to do most of the thing a developer advocate is doing, meaning that like I moved to developer relation, and I miss coding full time. But when I put that in the scale, the human side of the world of the role, the type of task that we're doing, what we're accomplishing, helping people being successful, I'm like, yeah, okay, I miss coding full time, but I love that job so much, and it's still a technical job. So I'm like, yeah, I think I have like the best part of both worlds.
I honestly don't miss coding full time. I was getting really burnt out coding full time, and
Mm.
particularly working on stuff that I wasn't super passionate or enthusiastic about.
Oh,
Um, and like again, like I can do it, but like I didn't like it got to a point where like it wasn't I wasn't getting a lot out of it, and it was just a job. And the things that I like doing is like I like poking at things, I like testing things, I like building things, I like playing with new stuff and trying new technologies and new things. And I feel like I can do all of those things and that be my job. And I get to talk about it, and I get to share the cool stuff that I discovered with other people. And I can like talk about best practices and like all of those things. And like I still have the coder brain, but like, and I still do coding, but it's not I can do things that I'm like actually interested in
yeah.
doing.
Yeah, I heard. You know what? I think it's a little bit the same for me, but I still miss coding full time because my last role, I was a developer advocate, but I was more like a DevOps cloud native advocate, meaning that like I was talking a lot about Kubernetes. That was technical. I had to do some coding a little bit. Or product was written in Go. Sometimes like when
Hmm.
it was like, because Go is not my language, so sometimes I was able to fix little stuff, but I was like doing full-fledged DevRel stuff without too much coding.
Hmm.
So it's like been 2 years and a half that like I didn't code that much, and even like the 2-3 previous role as a developer advocate, I was really a developer advocate, but it didn't involve too much coding. Like I didn't need it to create like demo application or example how to use your SDK and stuff like that. So I think it's more personally I miss doing it a little more. So hopefully my next role is going to be a little more like, yes, DevRel, but like, hey, let me code a little bit, because also I've been doing DevRel for a long time, and I still consider myself technical. But if I really want to be honest, and maybe it's not a good thing to say when you're looking for a new job, but like I know I'm not as technical as I used to, because I'm
Right.
not coding full time for the last 14 years now. So I can have a discussion with people. I can talk tech. I can use most of the tech. I know in English it's usually not used in a good fashion, but I'm kind of like a jack of all trade. so I can play with mostly any programming languages, but I'm not an expert in all of them.
Right.
So having getting back on the horse would probably be something that would make more sense for me. So
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that I've sort of learned in the couple months that I've been doing DevRel as my actual title, not just an accidental title, is that there can be so many different interpretations and so many different implementations of what DevRel means and is at it depending on where you are and what the product is and what it can mean so many different things. It can focus on so many different areas. Um, and I enjoy that, and I enjoy that sort of like flexibility. Yeah. Uh-oh.
yeah, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, computer is hard. Technology is hard. So yeah, I enjoy that. The fact that the role is not always the same depending on where you work, which company, which team, but at the same time, it's a little bit of pain in the ass because, when you're looking for a job as a developer, you know what you're going to do. You're going to
Right.
code stuff. Like you're going to create application. The technology is going to be different. The industry targeted with your application is going to be different. Maybe the methodology you're going to use, but at the end, you code, you create an application. Developer advocate role for some company, it means like just a cool way to say marketing, with all respect for marketing. Sometimes it means like, hey, you're a salesperson, even if from my point of view you should not be like a direct salesperson in that role. And even with the people that have the same kind of vision about what is developer relation, or what is developer advocate, it can mostly be like, hey, no, actually you're a technical writer, because mostly
Right.
everything we need from you is technical writing, or you're just a public speaker. So I understand your point, but like I would really love that, like when you read developer advocate, you kind of know the job.
So
Like you just
a unified description.
exactly. And you know what? I have a question unrelated to DevRel. I've been sharing a couple of links that are related to like blogs, website, and people may wonder, and I also wonder, what is jazzsequence?
jazzsequence is my online pseudonym that I've been using for a number of years. Originally, it's actually like a second generation online pseudonym, because originally, okay, so the full story is when I was in college, there was an experimental music band that came and performed at my college in like the lobby or something, and they described some of their songwriting as using fake math. And the idea of fake math was a really interesting idea. So I carried that with me, and I also made experimental music, so I had that in my head, and then I made a song called Fake Math Fibonacci Jazz. And if you don't know what Fibonacci is, there's a Fibonacci sequence. It's like the first programming, like my first, like I took C++ in college, and the first assignment was like create the Fibonacci sequence, and I think that's pretty common. And so fake math Fibonacci jazz was this idea of fake math, the Fibonacci sequence, and then jazz, because jazz is like improvisational, free form, like all that jazz. It just means like a bunch of stuff that's not sequential and very much not math and very much not in the Fibonacci sequence. And so then I started using Fibonacci jazz as my online handle, and a friend of mine in a forum referred to me as Jazz Sequence, just like like whatever, responding to something that I said, and I decided I like Jazz Sequence way better than Fibonacci Jazz, and I've been using that for about, I don't know, 18 years, something like that, like a really, really long time. That's how you find me on the internet is Jazz Sequence. That's the full story of Jazz Sequence.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And when you say 20 something years, I'm like, okay, it's part from the kids listening to us. Chris and I are a little bit older, but I don't know how old you are. But like, if you're talking about using a pseudonym, it was the pre-social media internet, where like you should not never use your name, never give personal information, do not share any pictures. So we all add like pseudonym, like
Mm-hmm.
nickname that we're using. Like nobody really know my real name. Some people that I chat with a couple of times, they know I was Fred, but that's it. And maybe if we were really close, they know I was living in Montreal, but they didn't know which neighborhood. They didn't know like they you should like we were at a point where like you should not share anything personal on the internet because Steve, because whatever reasons, like hackers and stuff like that. And I don't know what happened, but at some point the world changed and he
Yeah.
was like,
We
no,
stopped
no,
caring.
yeah, stop caring about that. Share everything and anything about you. You see it with social media. Like me, I went from like I share nothing to I'm really transparent about like a lot of things that I'm sharing. I share a lot of pictures about things happening in my life, and you can nearly pinpoint me like where I live right now if you just take 5 minutes to look at my information and what I'm doing. You basically can know me, which make it hard sometimes when I go on a date and the date just took a couple of minutes to look for me in the internet and she's like, oh, I know you do that, oh, you love that, oh, you have cats, oh, you have this. And I was like, there is so much information out there. But yeah, previous like many years ago, we had nickname, and no way that my real name was out there on the internet. It was impossible to think about that.
I remember the first major WordPress event that I went to. This was pre-Slack days. This was when all of our social interaction was on IRC, and I was
I miss
jazzsequence on
that.
IRC, obviously, and I was involved with the docs team. And so when I was talking to and I got to know other people in the docs team really well, and they only knew me as jazzsequence because that's that was the only information that was out there. And so I went to an event and I was like, "Hi, I'm Chris," and then the blank
People are like,
stares and I'm like, "Jazz sequence," and they're like, "Oh, jazz sequence," and like embrace me in a hug and like, "Oh, like let me introduce you to everyone." And like it's yeah, that was the olden days when people didn't have real names.
yeah, I miss that IRC time. Look, I really love chatting on IRC. That was a great way to connect with people. And so my nickname, and bear with me on this one, my nickname was Bumpered. Like a car bumper, but with a T. And not because I was fat. It's just because at high school, there's always like one funny person in your classroom, and at some point, I can't remember why, I started to do rhymes with my last name, which is Harper. And it was like Harper, blah, blah, blah. And Bumper came in. And people were like, oh, Bumper, you're Bumper. And they started to call me like that. So when I started on IRC, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I could use Bumper. But Bumper, like Bumper, was already taken for whatever reasons.
So you just
So I
add a letter at
decided
the
to add
end.
a T. And I was like, that's my nickname. And, we didn't we started to get to know people online a little bit when you were often like in the same channels and artists and stuff like that. And what I really love as a social person is that we were doing those GT get together, like meeting like a group of people together in real life. So that was interesting. Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about that, so you can tell me no. But you mentioned WordPress.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that happened with WordPress recently. I
Uh-huh.
use WordPress nearly since like 2 3 years after it was a thing. I've always used WordPress. Recently, just for the sake of simplicity, not totally related with this WordPress saga. A little bit that gave me the push that I needed, but like I decided to just move to some kind of like it's 11 ti or 11 ti. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, how you said that I'm using, and now it's just like markdown file. It is just make my life easy because I don't have to update plugins and stuff like that. My website like now looks like shit, but at least it's functional and there's the information there. But yeah, do you have any comments, or you don't have to, but like about what's happening with WordPress right now? I'm just
I
curious.
have so many thoughts. Where to even start? I think that uh, like I think that my biggest takeaway from the hashtag WP drama is more around the unfortunate side effects that are currently being felt and likely going to be felt for at least the next couple years in the greater WordPress community. Like there's a ripple effect, right? Like there's a thing that started with Matt and WP Engine, and that's its own thing, and we
Yeah.
could get into that or not, whatever. But beyond that, there are these like ripple effects that are affecting individual like customers of WP Engine, customers of Automatic, people who aren't even customers of either of those things, people who are evaluating WordPress, who might be on Drupal, who might be on Adobe Experience Manager, who, other places who are like, well, I don't want to do that now because I don't know enough about this thing that's happening to know if I should be concerned about it.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna like veer away and pick something else. And then just like the division sort of in the community, the idea that like if our benevolent dictator for life decides that he wants your plugin or doesn't like your plugin or your organization, he could just kind of turn it off or like
Yeah.
seize control. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on. There's a lot of stuff that has been said about it, and it creates this sort of like sense of turmoil. In reality, I don't know that like the software's not going anywhere. People are
Mhm.
going to continue to build on it. It's going to continue to be stable, even if there's not a regular cadence of major releases over the next couple years. It's not going to be the end of the world because there's still going to be like minor releases, bug fixes, security updates. All that stuff is going to still happen, and feature development can still continue to happen in like the plugin ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, like we were talking before we got on this idea of the new buzzword vibe coding, which I think I was saying while you were offline. That was a term that I didn't know existed before like 3 days ago.
Yeah. Me
Um,
too.
and but now I've seen like all these videos in like different WordPress channels and stuff about like using like AI to like rather than go to the WordPress plugin repository and find a plugin to do the thing that you want. Maybe that plugin has a bunch of things that you want, and maybe that plugin also has a bunch of things that you don't want. Using AI to build the plugin that you actually want that only does the thing that you want, or using AI to build a theme or a site or whatever, that whether you have a lot of development experience, maybe you don't have a lot of development experience, you just want to like prototype something or doing something on a small scale. And I think that's really interesting. And using that as like an alternative to like either commissioning a team or building yourself this extensive plugin, or finding something that kind of sort of fits and you can like deal with the like places where it doesn't fit or something.
Mhm.
I think it's a really interesting. There's a lot of feature in that, and then also like related to that. Drupal CMS came out in January, and one of the things, and I've been catching up because I'm actually going to DrupalCon next week, so it'll be
Oh,
my
nice.
first DrupalCon as a WordPresser. So I was catching up on all the things that are happening in Drupal, and I was watching the last couple of Dries notes, and he demoed the AI recipe inside the Drupal CMS, and which basically gives you a little chatbot that allows you to do stuff in Drupal that would have required a bunch of different configuration things, or like you'd have to like write some config files or whatever. And I don't know how to do anything in Drupal, right? So like this is perfect for me
Mhm.
because I can have a little chatbot and say, hey, I want to make a content type that is this thing. And the chatbot is like, okay, yeah, here's how you do it. And I will just like insert this for you. I'm like, okay, cool. That's cool. Like I
Yeah.
want that. I want that in WordPress. I want more of that so that I can like I feel like that is the thing that was missing for me to like get into Drupal, which has always been sort of like really big and overwhelming to me. Like it now I if I have a little friendly chatbot on the side that I can ask questions, like okay, I'll take that. That'll help me get over that hump.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Makes sense. And I won't comment too much on the WordPress drama thing, but I echo a little bit what you said about, like it's a little bit worrying that like one individual can just take over stuff. Like that's the part that I didn't like. And also thinking outside of WordPress. I mean, WordPress has been there since forever. Unless you were really closely part of the community, you didn't know that those things were happening. So you were seeing WordPress as like an automatic as like a success story when it comes to like giving back to the community, being open source, but like still be able to make a living out of it and building something, building a company. And I feel like it can set a precedent of like, oh, but you know what, automatic's done that, but like maybe it's just me overthinking that. But that was those were the things that worry me a little more.
Yeah,
And
I definitely feel like there's that vibe, and there's it's a worthy concern to be thinking about those things, because whether or not uh because, like, like, and I've been thinking a lot about like the differences and similarities between the Drupal ecosystem and the WordPress ecosystem. And Drupal has a benevolent dictator for life too, but Drupal also has a board and a community that can feed into the board, and the board can decide, oh, like if Dries decides he wants to take Drupal in a particular direction, and the community through the board says we don't want to do that, then that is like he's only one vote, right? Whereas
mm,
if Matt decides, for example, he wants to drop Gutenberg into WordPress and it doesn't matter what you think, then he's going to do it, and he has done it. And that's so there's a difference in that approach. And like um I think that there is something to be said for a strong, charismatic leader that is leading the direction of a product. Like
mhm.
Steve Jobs is really good at what he did, and he led Apple to like great success, and that's fantastic. But there's also a point at which maybe it would be good to introduce some other voices into the mix,
Yeah.
not necessarily to be the final deciding factor, but like to have more voices and more opinions that are listened to, and more community, like grassroots sort of like organizing around things.
Yeah, and last thing about that, as you said, like I don't think WordPress is going anywhere. I think it's still going to be there, still going to be used, but it pissed off a lot of people, and they lost a lot of contributor and people that were
Yeah.
evangelizing the platform. Like I've always tell people, like, hey, you know what, you're not a technical person. You want to start a blog, you want to start a website. WordPress is one way to go. It's working well. I've been using that. This for years. It doesn't go anywhere, and now I'm a little less inclined to say that. As I said, not because I believe that WordPress is going to die, but I'm like, is it the kind of things I want to promote and I want to tell people like go there and use it? So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, right.
it's
And the people that are left behind, who are super active in the community, who don't necessarily agree with a single person's opinions about the state of things or the direction of the product or whatever, have to sit with that, right?
yeah,
Like people like me and other developers who have been in this for like forever, have to like be okay, or at least tolerant of the fact that yes, I want to use WordPress. Yes, I like WordPress. Yes, I believe that you can build anything on top of WordPress, and I truly do. But also, I have to, be okay with the fact that if Matt wants to take the direction of WordPress out over here, or slow down development, or do whatever, that's just a thing I have to live
yeah,
with, right? Like,
yeah. No, that's not interesting situation to say the least. We had Nightfly 89. Welcome back. I guess it's been a while. I didn't see you here. Great insights as always. Salute from Romania. Every time you say that, I miss Romania. I was lucky enough that when I was working at Fitbit, we had an office in Romania. A lot of engineers there, so I had the pleasure to go 2 or 3 times because that was cheaper to bring U.S. folks to Romania than bring Romanian to the U.S. That was
sounds
really,
familiar.
yeah, that was sad for Romanian people that would probably would like to come to San Francisco where the head office were. But it was pretty exciting for the North American and us to go to a country where I didn't have the chance to go before. And what I discovered is, amazing people, great culture, and yeah, our offices were pretty good there too. So thanks again, Nightfly, for joining us today. And before we move to the demo, I have one last question, because I share a couple of links about Pantheon. You said that like it's your employer. You quickly touch base about it, but like, can you tell us a little more, sorry, about what is the company, what is the product, and what you do as a developer advocate there?
Okay, sure. Pantheon we like to call ourselves a web ops platform, which basically is sort of like hosting plus developer tooling stuff. So my personal experience with Pantheon was that, as an agency developer, it was one of the only, maybe the only at the time, host that had Git sort of built in, and as like a fundamental part of how it worked. You didn't have to build your own Git pipeline, but even more than that, the sort of killer feature, the thing that like truly made me say, we should have all of our sites working on Pantheon, was we have a feature called multi-dev, which is, if you've ever like worked with a development and a staging server and a live server, and they're keeping those different things separate. There's probably situations where you're testing code, and where do you put that code that you want to test? What environment do you want to put that on? Do you put it on dev? Do you put it on staging? And the situation that I would find myself in, both at the time and later, was, well, you put it on dev, right? And then dev gets really dirty and gross, and like you can't. So then you have to like split off your dev environment. That branch is, you just assume that that's a dirty branch, and your staging is like the pristine environment, and your live environment is probably coming off your staging environment. Well, we have this feature called multi-dev, where you can do all of your development on a branch, push that branch up into a multi-dev, and then that has its own standalone environment just for that branch. And that's like the killer feature. That's the thing that like, when I was in one of my first agency, I was like, why can't all of our all the sites we work on use this? When I went to my next agency, we had built our own stack on top of AWS, which had the same sort of dev, stage, and live. And I was like, if we could do this thing that Pantheon does today, then that would be amazing. And it's like, yeah, but spinning up environments in containers is hard. So, and a lot of work, and we had a very small team to even build that thing. So we also have like a command line tool. We have different ways of deploying code out to like many different environments. So as a developer advocate at Pantheon, one of the things that I'm doing is talking about all the stuff that Pantheon does. And I guess I could plug Pantheon, right? Because we have open office hours every week that I'm involved in, on recurring on Wednesdays. People can come in and ask questions with the DevRel team. We started doing product tours, which are also on our site, and you can sign up and get like a sort of an overview of how Pantheon works and what it does. And we go into like one specific feature a little bit more than others, but we generally do sort of like cover like the whole deal. And yeah, like doing stuff like this, making videos, doing live streams where people do stuff, and we say like, and you can do this on Pantheon. And it's it's a lot of fun. But that's sort of the Pantheon elevator pitch in a nutshell.
No, that's great. Thanks, because I know the name, but to be honest, I didn't know what you're doing, and I usually try not to read more about like the guest employer. Actually, I try not to read about the guest or the employer, because as I told you before we started the show, I really try to have like a natural discussion, and it's just a pleasure to learn and having the input from the guest. But you had me at CLI. I'm a terminal person. I love to be in my terminal. I spend a lot of time to configure it, make it like just to feel like home. So every time there is a CLI, that's my happy place, being in the terminal. So that's pretty good. So on that note, I don't know what you said when I was having my power outage and I was not there. I think you talked a little bit about vibe coding.
I was teasing it.
You was teasing. That's amazing. You're a born developer advocate. And so yeah, we're gonna switch to the demo part. Basically, you're going to tell us how to use AI to do what we now call vibe coding. So we did not know at the time, but we're the cool kids right now with that demo in the DevRel show. We were talking before the show just a little bit. and Chris was saying like, oh, that's going to be a little bit like vibe coding. And I was like, you know what? I didn't heard that terms until like 2 or 3 days ago. And Chris was like, me neither. But now it's everywhere. I keep seeing like for the last 2 days, I spend a lot of times on LinkedIn now because, I always spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn because that's a great way for my work as a developer advocate. But now looking for a job, I spend a little more time on
A little bit
LinkedIn,
more time. Yep.
a little bit more time, and like it's just about vibe coding on Twitter, even on Blue Sky. It's vibe coding, vibe coding, vibe coding, and I was like, I don't know what that means. Like I've never heard that, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, it's a thing that people were doing for a while now, or quote unquote a while, but now we just coin a term, and like this is what the cool kids are talking about. So yeah, we're gonna move to the demo, and the stage is yours, my friend.
Yes. I was going to talk about this thing that I built originally. My initial thought was like I was going to talk about the thing that I built and the end result, but then I realized that the end result wasn't nearly as interesting as the way that it was built. So I've been doing this thing, which we now know is called vibe coding, which I think is a really cool idea, cool term for it, which is basically AI assisted development. So here's an example of a thing that I used AI to build that we currently have linked in our Pantheon docs and a thing that people can use today. Basically, the ask was, we're making a platform change, which will ultimately, the end result will be that we're no longer going to support TLS 1.0 and 1.1 connections. Not going to go into what TLS is because that's a whole rabbit hole and there's a whole discussion about that. And just there's some Cloudflare documentation about what TLS is, and it's really good, and you should just read that. But anyway, the end result is like if you have a site and it links out to a URL with an API request or whatever that is only using TLS 1.1 or 1.0, it would break. And we want to make sure that our customers check their code to see if there's any link anytime that they're doing that. Like the idea is you probably would know if you're making a request to a site when you would be doing it. You might not know how to test to see what version of TLS it's compatible with. So the product manager leading this sort of initiative, I think he used ChatGPT to build a bash script, and basically it says like, look at your code, look at your whatever the path to your code is, make a list of all the URLs, and then for each URL, it's doing a curl request somewhere in here to see is this compatible with TLS 1.2. And so like, okay, that's great. That doesn't really scale because not all of our customers are going to be able to run a bash script. Like we want to make it at minimum barrier to entry, right? We want like normal people who don't even know what TLS is to just get a thing at the end that says it works, it doesn't work, here's what I need to do, right? So I took that bash script and I put it into ChatGPT, and this is vibe coding. Now we're vibing. And I say, I have this bash script, and then I copy the entire bash script. And this is kind of how when I'm working with ChatGPT, I try to give it as much information about the context as possible. I've been using ChatGPT since December of 2022, like when it first sort of became publicly available. And what I've learned is that there's times where it sort of like forgets its own context, particularly as conversations get longer. So what I do to solve for that is like I give it the same information over and over just to make sure that it knows what we're talking about. So in this case, this is the first time I'm opening this conversation and say, I've got this big bash script, and what I want is on a standard WordPress site, this finds a lot of unnecessary URLs that are in comments or other places that aren't actually part of the execution. What I really want is to check any executed code for outgoing requests that might be denied if the remote server doesn't support TLS 1.2 or higher. Is there a way to do this inside of a WordPress plugin in such a way that only the relevant URLs are tested, avoiding things that are inside doc blocks? So ChatGPT says, sure, I'll do that, and I'll take that code and I'll build a plugin, and it gives me a bunch of code. And then I take that code and I'm like, okay, great. Can you make this a WP CLI command? Because the first thing that I want is, can I just do this from the command line so I can test it right now? Because I don't necessarily want to scan my whole site. I just want to, do it locally. So it's like, great, it'll do that. Here's the CLI function. It's writing a bunch of code, yada, yada, yada. And this is how you use it. That's the command that it's just created. It's got a way to check for a specific path, which is great. So like I can check everything, or I can check a specific, like all the themes or all the plugins or whatever. It adds a progress bar, which is what I asked for. So that's great. So then I'm like, okay, at this point I'm testing, right? Like I've got this code in my local environment and I'm running the WP CLI command. So then I say, okay, can there be a check for a valid URL before checking TLS, so that things that don't actually have URLs return as errors? Because what I'm seeing in the results is it's checking like domain.com and like, dev.null and like a lot of example stuff that I don't want to, like, I shouldn't need to run a TLS scan on those things because they're not real things, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I'll add that, and here's the updated code. I copy that into my local environment, and then I'm like, okay, can I also ignore URLs that 404? Because one of the things that I'm seeing is some of the URLs are still, they're valid in that they're structured as a valid format, but they still, like, it's a page that doesn't exist. And it's like, okay, we can check that, and it updates the code for that. And it shows me this. Now it's showing me what the example output is going to look like. And it's like, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. But I'm noticing that some of the URLs it's scanning have this GID. And I'm like, what is that? And does that need to be scanned? And ChatGPT says, no, it doesn't need to be scanned. That's some GraphQL global ID thing. So it's going to filter those things out. So at the end, ultimately, I'm like, okay, do a sort of bunch of back and forth, and then eventually, like I get into like actual debugging. This is where I noticed, actually looking at the code and digging into it, I noticed that it was specifically running a check using this particular constant, stream crypto method TLS12, and the documentation in the doc block that it wrote says it checks if it's TLS 1.2 or higher, but I checked the php.net for that string, and I'm like, this only checks PHP, TLS 1.2. Does that actually, like, are you correct? Is that correct? Or is it going to also be relevant for 1.3 in the case where, like, maybe a site host supports 1.3 but doesn't support 1.2? Would that still be valid? And it comes back and says, no, you're right. We should check that. And it gives me a solution. And eventually, like, I get into, can we build an Ajax framework for it to, like, do sort of it in the admin? And then at the very end, I'm like, okay, great. I did all of this stuff. How do I build a Drupal module that does all the exact same thing? Because I'm a WordPress person. I've got like 18, 20 years of WordPress development experience.
Yeah.
I have zero experience doing Drupal. I know what I want it to do, but I don't know how to make that happen. And so I go through the same process with that. And yeah, now we've got like, I've tested it. I've got actually unit tests running on both the WordPress and the Drupal version. They both have a command line version where you can run the commands from a command line, or an admin interface where it's got the same sort of like progress bar, where it scans stuff. But yeah, the interesting part of this is, like, I knew what I wanted. Could be explicit about, like, the goals of what I was going for. I was checking the code at each iteration, right? Like, I was making sure that both from like a visual, like looking at what the code is doing, but also like making sure I'm testing everything. And then I when I was applying it to Drupal, I'm like, okay, I know what I want it to do. I just don't know how to make the Drupal do the Drupal things. And I was able to get it to give me something that I think is pretty good. Like I could tell from like the WordPress perspective, like I'm pretty satisfied with the outcome and like how it came out, and like I understand the code structure and I understand like where things are and where things need to make changes, and and it looks to me as like it's structured, like the code style is good. Like I think it's how I would probably have written it. From a Drupal perspective, like I ran it through, the standard like Drupal linting and stuff to make sure that it follows Drupal standards and stuff. But like beyond that, I don't really know what a
Yeah.
Drupal module is supposed to look like. But it seems like it looks good, and it is working. And I trust that it does the thing because it does the thing for me. Like I said, I think that's the more interesting story is sort of collaborating with large language models who have like maybe there isn't a plugin or a module that does this specific thing that exists out in the world, but there are pieces of code everywhere, right, that
Mhm.
do a lot of these things, and then the AI just kind of like gloms them together, and then through the interaction and the exchange, you're able to come out the other side with something that is tested, working, and as long as there's somebody like a human operator that is able to say, no, you did that wrong, or no, that's
This
not what I
is
want, and understands like where those changes and those like differences need to be.
Yeah, this is one of the thing. I've read a lot about with vibe coding and basically anybody using AI to code was there are a couple of things. Like people are afraid that like people like a lot of people will start to vibe coding and we're going to end up with a lot of like shittier code than like if it was like human building them. And I feel like your demonstration was a little bit of that because from your explanation of the process, you like every step you had to like, no, but it's not exactly what I want to do. But like, why are you doing that? You don't need that. No, but
Mhm.
like, are you also checking that thing that like just makes sense to do it, but like you didn't do it, and you spend a lot of times to do that back and forth. But you like from your point of view, you end up with some quality code, right?
Yeah, I think so. And like, I think the key thing is like, if I was going to build this thing myself, I would be doing all of the like checking Stack Overflow and doing all the Google searches of like all the specific functions and everything. And I'd be reading all the documentation and whatever. And like, that's all the busy work that like AIs are kind of good at. I know what I want, and I also know what it looks good. And like I think the key thing that with any kind of AI assisted development is there needs to be a human operator, and the human operator, if you want it to be like actually good as opposed to just like a prototype or something that's like an experiment or a one-off or whatever, there needs to be a human on the other side that is able to like know what to look for, like knows to check php.net for like the specific description of that constant to make sure that this is doing the thing that I expect it to do. That's
Mhm.
actually looking through the lines of code and like, that one doesn't look quite right. Or like, this works, but, and then this is the actual thing that I want. Without just the human and a lot of people that I see and I've talked to are like, AI is going to take my job. And I'm like, well, not yet, because AI is
Yeah.
not that smart. And I think part of that comes from, for me, like having used ChatGPT and Anthropic and like various different, like DeepSeek and all the things, like played with them all for like the last couple years since they've been a big deal. Like I expect the AI bot to be dumb. Like I expect it to not know everything or not get everything right. I expect it to get pretty close, but I understand that fundamentally there's going to be errors, and I go into it with that understanding, so I'm not surprised or I'm not expecting like production level code on the first try.
Yeah, it's one thing. I think you touched a point where like you need to have some kind of expertise, not basically on AI, but like on like the end results that you want when you use AI to know like if the end result is going to be good or not. I was a little bit late in the AI game because I was super how can I say that politely skeptical about all the AI stuff. And the ethical side of it is not something that impressed me, like how ChatGPT is able to give you all those answers. It's basically stealing data from everywhere and anywhere where they don't
Oh
have
yeah.
the rights or copyright. So that part, it's why it took me a long time to try it. But every time, like I don't use it often, but every time I'm like, I was super clear with my instruction, even some non-software development things. As I said before, I think I teach meditation, and I have my notes when I create my course, and I do it in French, but I had to do a workshop in English. And prior to having proper Google Translate and stuff, I would have like myself translate from French to English. And now I was like, you know what? I don't want to do that. Like there's tools for it there. And Google Translate, from my point of view, is really good when you have like a short amount of text. But when you
Mm.
have a lot of text,
Hmm.
at some point it kind of like translate word for word, and it's not a
Yeah.
real, like it's just like, oh, I
Right.
use the French word and I translate
It's
it to
vibe
English.
translating.
Exactly. Instead of instead of like doing a proper translation where it may not be the exact same sentence and words, but like that's how you say it in English.
Right.
And I found that ChatGPT was better at doing those translation. But sometimes I have like 4 pages of notes that I want to translate from French and English, and I keep telling him like, or it, or whatever you call ChatGPT, the bot, and I'm like, do all the text, everything. Don't ask me if I want to continue. Do it. Don't summarize. I want to have basically exactly the same content.
Yeah.
And even if I do all those warnings, because I learned to put warnings and like my first prompt was like translate the text from French to English, and the result was really bad. And now it's like 10 sentences, like translate from French to English. When there's that term, use that term. Don't summarize. Do it completely from the beginning to the end. I want all the translation. And I have like all those kind of like warning, and I still do a bad job at something as basic as like translating a text. So it's why I'm worrying about those things a little bit, but I definitely can see the benefit. There's a part of me. Oh, sorry, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think that that's valid, and I think the thing is, I think what I've learned in my own experimentation is that prompt engineering is a thing, right? Like you need to understand how to structure a prompt. And this is changing. It's like a moving target. They keep
Yeah.
moving the goalposts, right? Similar to like, once upon a time, you know, search engine optimizers would have to like update how they do search engine optimization every time Google made a change in how search engine results. It's the same deal. We're like, but you have to understand like how to structure a prompt to get the best results. And there's all sorts of like tricks and there's all sorts of things. And again, the things are always changing, but like um, it pays to be like verbose and specific. At least it does today, and that'll probably change tomorrow. Um, but um, but yeah, it's definitely its own thing, and I've actually seen like job listings for prompt engineers at like AI companies, like people whose job it is to craft prompts. And I think that that's ultimately like that's there's going to be like people again are worried about like how AI can is going to take away jobs, but I also think again because I think that there's going to always need to be a human operator,
Mm.
that it's going to open up the possibility of new jobs. And like I saw recently the analogy of in a kitchen, there's a master chef, and then you've got like sous chefs and like prep cooks and whatever, and like the AI isn't going to be the master chef, but the AI could be the
Mm.
prep cook or the sous chef. Like the chef is like making the recipes and saying this is what I want, and then down to the and ultimately they're responsible for everything that comes out of the kitchen, right? And because they're putting their name on it. And if anybody puts something together on a plate
Uh,
that is gross and disgusting, it's going to be the chef that is going to get yelled at, right? And the chef is going to go out to the table and apologize and say like, "Oh, this is, we'll refund you whatever," because it's their name, it's their restaurant, whatever. And it's the same thing is true with AI assisted development. The developer that is controlling the AI is fundamentally the one responsible for any of the code that it generates. So you better be pretty sure that it does the thing. And you can have AI help you write tests, and you can have AI help you do whatever, but you also need to be involved in the process. And you need to,
Yeah.
like, if you're having AI write the tests, you need to make sure that those tests are testing valid things. Like, it can get like, I know GitHub Copilot is super enthusiastic about writing a whole bunch of like unit tests, but like, if it's just testing the same thing over and over, that's not super
Yeah,
helpful, right?
not gonna
Like,
help you. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I love that analogy. Part of like that new vibe coding terms that we've seen so much in the last 2 or 3 days. There is someone, a non-technical person, who create like a full application and wanted to do business and everything, and I don't remember who it was, but like they were really vocal about, I was able to build all that with AI, and the company is going down because it was not a technical person. They had a lot of issues. They don't know how to debug. They
Hmm.
don't know how to fix.
Hmm.
Security problem because probably their prompt was just like, what, make me a logging page, but like it probably didn't have like, oh, it needs to be secure and people
Right.
cannot access without logging. Like the prompt was probably like, has basic MI first, like translate that text from French to English, which you would
Well, and
expect to
it's
have something of
and
quality out of it.
from a vibe coding without development experience, you run into the you don't know what you don't know problem, right? Like, an engineer who's doing this understands the things that they need to be worried about, and they can ask questions, they can ask the AI to make sure that it does those things. But if you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
you don't know to check for security, you don't know to check for whatever, so you don't know that that's going to be a thing that it's going to bite you in the ass if all you're doing is asking ChatGPT or Copilot or Cursor or whatever to build this thing for you.
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Awesome, Chris. Great explanation from your thought process and like the end result. I love that. That was really on time with like, as I was saying, what the cool kids are doing right now. So thanks for the demo. Thanks for sharing your experience. Anything else you would like to share with folks before we end the
I'll actually
show?
be. I'm actually going to do a live stream on the Pantheon YouTube channel in 2 months, in May 14th, I believe, with a friend of mine who did a course on LinkedIn Learning about AI assisted development. So we'll have a chance to dig into this even more, get some examples from a perspective that's not me, and yeah, I'm on the socials, so and saw my links pop up in the bottom. So if anybody has questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm super nerdy about using AI stuff, and also I'll also plug my blog. Jazzsequence.com. I have a series on artificial intelligence from like when I first started using it to basically now, and the context in which I use it a lot that I talk about on my blog is not generally from development at all. I also am a dungeon master running Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. So I've been using ChatGPT from the very early days to like,
Oh,
can I have ChatGPT help me as a dungeon master? So you can read about that on my blog. I have a test that I've been each iteration and with different AI chatbots have been asking it to write me an HP Lovecraft based story, and just so I can compare different versions and different chatbots over time as sort of like a benchmark test. So you can read all about that stuff on my blog too.
that sounds good. That's amazing. So, folks, you have all the links. Before I let you go, a little reminder, if you are hiring or someone on your team is hiring, or you know that someone at a company you work for is hiring a developer advocate, either an IC or leadership role, I'm having a lot of interesting discussion right now, but I didn't reach the point where I get an offer yet. So I'm still on the lookout for my next job. What I'm looking for is just, a company where the product could be something that I'm excited about, or I know that would be excited about. Outside of that, it's really, let's have a talk and let's see if there's a good fit. So that was my self promotion at the end
Hire
of the
Fred.
show. Thank you. Yeah,
Definitely
that's
higher cred.
exactly that. That's exactly that. So, on that note, thanks everybody who was online. Thanks for the people also watching the recording, and hope you have a good rest of the day. And see you in 2 weeks for the next DevRel show. Thanks, Chris. Bye, everyone.
Yep.